There is a moment, somewhere in the middle of an ordinary life, when a person realizes that everything they have been running toward is not what they actually want, and everything they have been running from has been following them the entire time. Most people have this realization and then do nothing with it. They return to their routines, their distractions, their comfortable avoidances, and they carry that quiet unease with them for the rest of their lives. But there existed a class of men and women in feudal Japan who were trained from childhood to confront this exact moment, not once, not in a crisis, every single morning before the sun had fully risen, before they had spoken a single word to another human being. They were trained to accept death, and in doing so, they learned how to live. Chapter 1. The Weight of an Unexamined Life. His name was Daniel. He was 34 years old, and by every external measure, he was succeeding. He had a career that paid well, an apartment in a city that never slept, a calendar full of obligations that kept him too busy to think. He was the kind of person who described himself as stressed but fine, always fine. The way most people are fine, which is to say, not fine at all, but unwilling to sit still long enough to feel the full weight of what is actually happening inside them. Daniel had not made a single decision in 3 years that originated from something he genuinely believed. He had been reacting, adapting, managing, performing. The breaking point, when it came, was not dramatic. There was no crisis, no accident, no sudden loss. He simply sat down one evening after work, picked up his phone out of habit, put it back down, and felt, for the first time in a very long time, the absolute silence of his own life pressing in around him. It lasted only a few seconds before he reached for the phone again. But in those few seconds, something had cracked open. A question had entered the room that he could not push back out. The question was not complicated. It was 4 words. Is this my life? In the Japan of the 16th and 17th centuries, there was an understanding among those who followed the way of the warrior that this question, this exact feeling, was not a problem to be solved. It was an invitation. The samurai did not fear the moment of confrontation with one's own life. They prepared for it. They cultivated it deliberately, the way a gardener tends soil before anything is planted. They understood something that modern psychology is only beginning to articulate clearly, that a life unexamined is not merely unfulfilling, it is dangerous. Because a man who does not know who he is will become whoever the world tells him to be. Chapter 2. Hagakure and the Practice of Dying. In 1716, a collection of thoughts and reflections was compiled by a scribe named Tashiro Tsurumoto, based on years of conversations with a retired samurai named Yamamoto Tsunetomo. That collection became known as the Hagakure, loosely translated as Hidden by Leaves, or In the Shadow of Leaves. It was not meant to be a philosophical treatise. It was not written for publication or posterity. It was a private record of wisdom, meant to capture the essence of what it meant to live as a warrior in an age when the age of warriors was already ending. And its opening line has unsettled readers for 300 years. The way of the samurai is found in death. This is the line that most people misread. They hear it and imagine something morbid, a glorification of violence, a cult of fatalism, a medieval death wish dressed in armor and ceremony. But that is not what Tsunetomo meant. What he was describing was a practice, a daily, deliberate, philosophical practice of meditating on one's own mortality, until the fear of death no longer had power over one's choices. He wrote that a samurai, when faced with a decision between life and death, should choose death without hesitation. Not because life is worthless, but because a person who has genuinely made peace with dyings no longer capable of cowardice. They cannot be manipulated by fear. They cannot be controlled by the threat of loss. They become, in a very real sense, free. Daniel did not know about the Hagakure when he put his phone down that night. He had never read a word of samurai philosophy. But what he was experiencing, that hollow pressure, that sense of a life being lived on someone else's terms, was precisely the condition that the samurai tradition was designed to address. The samurai did not wait for a crisis to examine their lives. They chose, deliberately and repeatedly, to confront the impermanence of everything they had, everything they were, and everything they loved. Because they understood that impermanence, when ignored, becomes anxiety. But when accepted, truly deeply accepted, it becomes clarity. Chapter 3. The first discipline, sitting with discomfort. Daniel made one decision that night. He decided that for 30 days he would wake up 30 minutes earlier than he needed to, and he would sit in silence. No phone, no music, no podcast, no planning, just sitting. He was not meditating, not in any formal sense. He did not know how. He was simply sitting with himself, the way you might sit with someone you have been avoiding for a very long time, because something finally told you that the avoidance was costing more than the conversation. The first week was almost unbearable. His mind produced noise at a volume he had not expected. To-do lists surfaced. Old arguments replayed themselves. Worries about money, about work, about what people thought of him. They rose up in sequence, like they had been waiting behind a door, and he had finally, accidentally, opened it. He kept checking the clock. He kept finding reasons to get up. On the fourth morning, he sat for 11 minutes and then made coffee, and he told himself that was enough. But he came back the next morning, and the morning after that. The Zen monks of feudal Japan had a term for what Daniel was experiencing. They called it monkey mind, the restless, chattering, uncontrolled movement of an untrained consciousness that leaps from thought to thought, the way a monkey leaps between branches, never still, never settled, never truly present. The practice of Zazen, seated meditation, was not designed to make the monkey stop. It was designed to teach the practitioner to observe the monkey without becoming it, to watch the noise without being swept away by it. This distinction is subtle, but it is everything, because the goal was never silence. The goal was the capacity to remain still in the presence of noise. That is not a small thing. That is, in fact, the foundation of every other discipline the warrior tradition demands. Chapter 4. Musashi and the Geometry of a Life. Miyamoto. Musashi was born in 1584 in the Harima province of Japan, and before he died at the age of 60, he had fought in over 60 duels and had never been defeated. He is perhaps the most studied swordsman in Japanese history, and yet the work he is most remembered for has almost nothing to do with swordsmanship. The Go-Rin no Sho, the Book of Five Rings, was written in a cave by an old man who had put his sword down years earlier, addressed to students he would never meet, about a way of thinking that he believed applied to everything, not just to fighting, to strategy, to craft, to the construction of a life. Musashi wrote about what he called the void, the fifth ring, the most difficult to explain and the most essential to understand. He described it as the space beneath all technique, all thought, all strategy, the place where a warrior arrives when they have practiced something so completely that the practice itself disappears, and what remains is pure, unmediated response. He was not describing magic. He was describing the outcome of an almost inhuman degree of repetition and presence, sustained over decades. He was describing what happens when a person stops performing their life and starts actually living it. What Musashi understood, and what most people in the modern world are systematically prevented from understanding by the sheer volume and speed of their daily environment, is that excellence in anything requires, above all else, the ability to be fully present with what is directly in front of you. Not what happened yesterday, not what might happen tomorrow, not how you are being perceived, not whether you are winning, only this moment, only this action. The sword in your hand, or the conversation you are having, or the work on the table in front of you. Only this. Always only this. Chapter 5. The Architecture of Identity. By the third week, something had begun to shift in Daniel. It was not dramatic. He had not become a different person. But the silence in the mornings had begun to feel less like confrontation and more like conversation. He had started to notice something about himself that he had never had the stillness to notice before. That almost everything he believed about what he wanted, what he feared, what he valued, had been absorbed from other sources. His parents' definition of success, his company's definition of ambition, his social group's definition of a good life. He had mistaken inheritance for identity. He had been living someone else's architecture and calling it home. The samurai tradition had a concept for this kind of self-examination. It was embedded in the broader framework of Bushido, the way of the warrior, and it concerned itself deeply with the question of authenticity. A samurai was expected to know with absolute clarity what they stood for. Not in a vague, aspirational sense, but concretely. Chapter 6. The Way of Subtraction. There is a principle that runs through nearly every school of Japanese philosophy, from the aesthetic concept of Ma, the art of negative space, to the Zen tradition of eliminating unnecessary thought, to Musashi's insistence on stripping technique down to its essential core. The principle is this: mastery is not found in addition, it is found in subtraction. The tea master removes everything from the tea room that does not serve the experience of tea. The master calligrapher makes fewer strokes, not more. The swordsman at the highest level moves less, not more. What looks like simplicity from the outside is, on the inside, the result of decades of refinement, of adding and then slowly, deliberately, painfully removing everything that was not necessary. This runs directly counter to the logic of the modern world, which is a logic of accumulation. More information, more options, more productivity, more experiences, more connections, more, always more. And the result is not mastery. The result is noise. The result is the exact condition Daniel had found himself in. A life so full of input that he had lost the ability to hear his own signal. The samurai tradition would not have found this surprising. It would have found it predictable, because a mind that is filled cannot also be clear, and a life that is full cannot also be purposeful. These are not compatible states. Daniel began to subtract. He left 3 social commitments that had been draining him for years, without drama, without extensive explanation. He stopped consuming news for an hour in the morning. He began to eat the same breakfast every day, not out of rigidity, but because he recognized for the first time that the daily decision about what to eat was consuming a small but real amount of cognitive energy that he could redirect elsewhere. These were not large changes. They were not life-altering in any obvious sense, but they were deliberate. And deliberateness, sustained over time, changes a person in ways that dramatic decisions rarely do. It changes the texture of how they move through a day. It changes, gradually, who they are. Chapter 7. The Shadow of Fear. There is a passage in the Hagakure that reads in part, "Meditation on inevitable death should be performed daily. Every day, when one's body and mind are at peace, one should meditate upon being ripped apart by arrows, rifles, spears, and swords, being carried away by surging waves, being thrown into the midst of a great fire, being struck by lightning, being shaken to death by a great earthquake, falling from the 1,000-foot cliffs, dying of disease, or committing seppuku at the death of one's master. And every day, without fail, one should consider oneself as dead." This sounds extreme. It is extreme. But the intention behind it is not nihilism. The intention is radical, repeated confrontation with the thing that most controls human behavior without ever being spoken aloud. Fear of death, or more precisely, fear of loss, of ending, of disappearing, is the engine beneath almost every form of avoidance, conformity, and self-betrayal. The man who does not say what he truly thinks at a meeting is afraid. The person who stays in a relationship they know is wrong is afraid. The individual who never begins the work they know they are meant to do is afraid. The samurai tradition did not pretend this fear was irrational. It acknowledged the fear completely, and then it asked a different question. Since the ending is certain, since nothing is permanent, since the loss of everything is guaranteed, what then is the cost of choosing falsely? What is lost by living a life that is not yours? The answer the tradition offered was this: everything. Because the ending was coming regardless. The only variable was whether you had lived before it arrived. Daniel came to this understanding slowly, and not through philosophy. He came to it on a morning, 6 weeks into his silence practice, when he had a very clear thought, almost a vision, of himself at the end of his life looking back. The version of himself that appeared in that image was not disappointed about the things he had tried and failed. He was disappointed about the things he had not tried at all. He was disappointed about the person he had performed rather than the person he had been. It was not a comfortable thought, but it was a useful one. Perhaps the most useful thought he had had in years, and he sat with it, the way he had learned to sit with discomfort, without running, without reaching for his phone, without immediately turning it into a plan. He just let it be true. Chapter 8. Non-attachment and right action. One of the most persistent misunderstandings about Japanese warrior philosophy, and about Buddhist philosophy more broadly, from which much of it draws, is the concept of non-attachment. It is frequently interpreted as detachment, as indifference, as a kind of cold, emotionless withdrawal from the things and people that matter. This is almost precisely the opposite of what the tradition actually teaches. Non-attachment does not mean not caring. It means caring completely, while holding the outcome loosely. It means acting with full commitment and full presence, without tying your identity or your peace to the result. The samurai went into battle not because they did not value their lives, but because they had made peace with the possibility that their life might end in this battle, and had decided that the action itself was worth taking regardless of the outcome. This is a profoundly different relationship to action than the one most modern people maintain. Most people act only when the outcome seems sufficiently certain. They wait for guarantees. They seek assurances. They want to know it will work before they begin. And in waiting for certainty, they wait forever. Because certainty does not come before action. It sometimes comes through it. And often it does not come at all. The warrior tradition understood this and decided it did not matter. What mattered was right action. Action aligned with one's values, taken with full commitment, released without clinging. For Daniel, this translated into something concrete. He had been sitting with an idea for 2 years, a kind of work he wanted to do, a direction he had been afraid to move in because he could not guarantee it would succeed. The philosophy he had been absorbing slowly, imperfectly, through reading and through silence, had begun to change the question he was asking about it. He had been asking, will this work? He began asking instead, is this aligned with who I am? Is this action worth taking regardless of what comes back from it? And the answer to that question, when asked, was immediate and unambiguous. He did not know if it would succeed. He knew with sudden and complete clarity that not taking the action was worse than any outcome the action could produce. Chapter 9. The Long Practice. Miyamoto Musashi, in the final pages of the Book of Five Rings, wrote something that is often quoted in fragments but rarely considered in full. He wrote that the warrior who masters strategy does not do so by studying strategy alone. He does so by making the practice of refinement the whole of his life, not for a season, not for a campaign, not for a goal, but as a permanent orientation toward precision, clarity, and the elimination of waste. He described himself at the age of nearly 60 as still studying, still refining, still discovering imprecision in his own thinking and movement. He did not describe mastery as an arrival. He described it as a direction, a way of traveling, not a destination. This is the piece of the philosophy that the modern world finds most difficult to accept, because the modern world is structured around destinations, around outcomes, around the before and after. The transformation narrative compressed into 30 days or 12 weeks or 6 months. But the samurai tradition offers no compressed transformation. It offers only the practice, sustained indefinitely, with no promise of a dramatic before and after moment, no assurance that the work will be recognized or rewarded, no guarantee of anything except this, that a person who practices presence, discipline, and honest self-examination consistently and without exception over a long period of time will become someone fundamentally different from the person who does not. Not better in a moralistic sense. Clearer, more capable of choosing, more capable of acting without fear, more fully themselves. Daniel did not become a samurai. He did not have a dramatic awakening. What he had, after several months of small, deliberate, consistent practice, was something quieter and more durable than awakening. He had a different relationship with silence. He had a different relationship with fear. He had begun to make decisions that originated from somewhere inside himself, rather than from the management of other people's expectations. He was not finished. He would not be finished. That was, he had come to understand, precisely the point. The practice does not end. The refinement does not conclude. The way of the warrior is not a project to be completed. It is a posture to be maintained, a direction to keep walking in. Every single morning, before anything else, before the noise begins again. Conclusion: what death teaches the living. The samurai who was trained to accept death was not trained to be reckless with his life. He was trained to be ruthlessly honest about it. Because the proximity of death, held in the mind with clarity and without flinching, has a way of burning through everything that is not essential. It removes the pretense, it removes the performance, it removes the long chain of small compromises that accumulate year by year into a life that does not belong to the person living it. Death, meditated upon with sincerity, becomes the most reliable tool for understanding what actually matters. Not what you have been told matters, not what the world rewards. What matters to you specifically, irreducibly, when all the noise is removed. You do not have to be a warrior to use this. You do not have to adopt a philosophy wholesale, or practice any formal tradition, or undergo any dramatic change. You only have to be willing to sit, as Daniel sat, in the silence of your own life, long enough to hear something true, long enough to ask the question that the silence is asking you, long enough to stop running from the answer. The samurai called this the way, not a method, not a system. A way, a direction of movement, continuous, daily, without arrival, without end. The practice of becoming, through deliberate action and honest examination, the person you were before the world told you who to be. The way of the warrior does not promise peace. It promises clarity. And in a world as loud, as fast, and as distracting as the one we currently inhabit, clarity may be the rarest and most valuable thing a human being can possess. The samurai knew this. They built entire lives around the pursuit of it. They accepted death every morning so that they could finally be alive.